If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
Before we introduce today's guest, I'd like to tell you about a very special movie that's about to premiere. The movie's called The Mustang. I interviewed the co-writer and the producer, Laure de Clermont-Tonnerre, and she'll be available on number 513. Have a look for The Mustang when you look for a movie. I strongly recommend this movie. Now, today's guest we've had on before, Islay Auty. She's been on, I think, number 459. Now, Islay is the author of, I think, and I'll ask her in a second, about 15 books. There's quite a few technical, really sound technical books on coaching and riding. So we will talk a little bit about that. But anyway, I'm going to introduce Islay. Islay's going to talk today about 10 coaching traits amongst world-class coaches, and I think she's well qualified to do that. How are you today, Islay?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Good. Now, Islay, how many books?
Oh, gosh. Well, I wrote probably about 10 or 11 for the British Horse Society when I was very involved with the British Horse Society, which, of course, was our lead body, really, for education in the UK in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and now into today.
Okay.
And so I was involved with the writing of their technical education content. And then I moved on more recently to my own publications on coaching. I wrote coaching skills for riding teachers. And then more recently, in collaboration with Penny Pollard, I wrote the coaching. So, yes, quite a few.
All right. Now, we had a very informative talk last time, but I know you're going to enlighten us today on the 10 traits. And why did you choose this particular topic?
Well, I think evolving from the initial interview that we had, where I talked a bit about how I got into the profession that has been my life love, really. Mm-hmm. Then I started looking a little bit more closely at possibly what hopefully makes us a good coach, educator, teacher, whatever term you choose to put on it. And there are many, and certainly in the UK, we have lots of discussions about which particular role we fulfill. But as far as I'm concerned, they're all the same, and we are educators. And so what skills or criteria do we have to fulfill that make us hopefully a good educator? Okay. And so that's why I started thinking about these particular traits.
Good. Now, the first one you've got is listening. So tell us about listening, how important it is to listen, and is there a reason? I don't know if you've got these in any particular order. Do we need to listen first before we do anything else?
Yeah, I think there probably isn't an order, and probably through or as a result of this interview, other people listening to the interview may prioritize their own order of the points I'm making. But if we don't listen, we can't communicate. We can communicate from our point of view, but first and foremost, if you're going to have a good relationship with any pupil, particularly a less experienced pupil, you have to be able to listen. And for me, listening is a skill. We all hear, or those of us that are fortunate enough to be able-bodied, hear everything, all the sounds around us, animals, birds, music, and that is a huge privilege. But whether we always listen actively, that is a skill. So my husband, bless his heart, will tell you that he hears me all the time, but whether he actually listens to some of the things I say, often they go over his head, particularly if it's technical stuff and he's not particularly actively involved. So listening is a skill that, as an educator, I believe we have to work at and maintain and develop. And the more experienced we become, the often the skill of actually listening to our pupil who is saying to us, I'm nervous, or I don't know how to do this, or my horse won't do what I'm asking it to do. And we plow on giving the information that we know may help them to get it better, but actually we're not listening to the key point, which may be, I'm nervous. And so that's what you have to address before you can start giving all the technical information about how to make the horse go better. So it's, for me, a skill that requires active effort in actually listening.
Okay. And you talked a bit before, listening, before you get the sound technical knowledge. Why is the sound technical knowledge so important? And I'm asking a little bit because I want to know your opinion. I know that technical knowledge is important, but from your point of view, which might be different to my point of view, why is this so important?
Well, the horse is a very simple creature. He doesn't have the reasoning power that we have. He doesn't have the emotional hang-ups that we all suffer from. He doesn't have the intensity of thought and feeling that we have. He is an instinctive animal that basically moves towards things that don't frighten him and runs away from things that do frighten him. And then he is a gregarious animal that likes company, and he needs to eat and drink. And those are the things that actually drive him. Now, in educating, we need to have the technical understanding of the horse as a creature, and then the technical knowledge of what we are trying to train it to do, whether it's dressage or eventing or show jumping or racing or whatever it is. And then we have to have the skill and understanding to be able to communicate with our rider, who is a different being altogether and often needs or would like to have far more information than the horse needs. And therefore we have to have the skill to disseminate how much information to give to the rider or as ourselves to ride the horse with the clarity that the horse requires to understand what we want him to do. And we live in a culture now, or we certainly do in the UK, where we must have more training. You need more lessons and more education, and there's this available and that available. And very recently, in fact 2 weeks ago, we had an international event forum, basically for event riders rather than dressage or show jumping, but many of us who are what I call multidiscipline trainers go to conferences because they're hugely useful. And the ethos of this conference was not more training necessarily, but better training. Mm-hmm. And we again now live in a culture where there are many people training about horses. They're training dressage, they're training jumping, they're training good horsemanship, they're training the natural horseman methods. There are all sorts of opportunities in the education of riders and the training of horses. But for me, the crux of the matter is the sound technical knowledge at whatever level your rider is and whatever the aspirations of the rider are, and the competence and capability of the horse relevant to the aspirations and ability of the rider. And that in itself, from a coaching point of view, or from an education point of view, becomes a skill that we as educators must have to keep the information as simple as possible, not overcomplicate it, because horses are not deep thinkers, and to keep the information as clear as possible so that it delivers training or education for a creature who deserves us to consider his welfare above everything else. He doesn't come into this world and say, I'm going to be a dressage horse, I'm going to be an event horse. That's my aspiration. That is our aspiration. We must prioritise the horse's partnership with us in terms of his welfare and clarity of understanding. So that's, my link to the need for clear technical knowledge.
Yep. Now, this desire to pass on knowledge, I would think if someone puts almost a shingle on their door saying, I'm a coach, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, that's their job, to pass on knowledge. Tell us a little bit about why this is so important, why you've put this in your 10.
Well, yes, it's an interesting one, and it's possibly a slightly controversial one, because certainly in the UK, there are educators who earn a living because their passion is to pass on knowledge. Mm-hmm. And then there are many competitive riders, highly skilled and very successful competitive riders, who use teaching, coaching as an additional means to earn a living. And of course, they bring a tremendous amount in terms of their competitive experience and flair, and many of them are iconic. And therefore, that is very aspirational for the people that choose to go and train with them. But it doesn't necessarily mean that their priority is the desire to pass on knowledge. Mm-hmm. Their priority is to be a top rider. And sometimes the secondary need to earn a living becomes a necessity rather than a passion.
Yeah.
And I'm very careful about this, because there would be the other side where the top competitive rider would say to somebody like me, who has not ridden around Babington or ridden at Grand Prix, well, you're not as good as I am because you haven't done it. Mm. But I've done it to a high enough level to then be able to utilize that practical expertise, if you like, of actually competing against my passion, which is to share the joy and the excitement that I have always had from horses with other people who want to achieve the same. Mm-hmm. And, now as I'm moving into the sort of latter end of my career, and people say to me, well, aren't you going to retire? And I say, why would I retire from doing something I'm passionate about and I love doing?
Yep.
And as long as I am able to do what I do and people want me to do what I'm doing, I shall carry on. And if I can do it until I'm 90, well, that would be wonderful. Just look at the Queen, she's still riding.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, I have watched over the years people who teach with no passion. They teach because they're earning a living. Mm-hmm. And so for me, while I have passion to want to share what I know with other like-minded people, I should keep doing it. And the moment I don't have that passion, it's what gets me up in the morning.
Yep.
That's why I put it in, but it's probably a personal trait rather than a sort of generic trait, if that makes sense.
If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com.
Now, when we talked about listening, active listening, you did talk about communication, but would you like to talk about communication just a bit more now?
Yes, I mean, communication, again, is fundamental to what anybody as an educator has to do, because it's transferring your skill or knowledge to another person, or in the case of the partnership, to another creature. And communication comes in many, many forms. I think I put it in because in today's life, the methods of communication between us as human beings is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I'm talking to you on the other side of the world, and or 12 hours ahead of us, and we're talking as if we're in the same room is phenomenal.
Yep.
And all the methods now of instant communication in many ways are wonderful, because they expand so many things. But our communication with the horse is very fundamental, and we forget that at our peril. So, we again, coming back to the nature of the creature, we must feel, we must have good thought and preparation before our communication through aids, hands, legs, position, voice. We must remember that our communication with the horse is much more simple and basic than the communication that we now have readily available to us in terms of the highly technical world we live in. And particularly with young people, some of that natural awareness, reading body language, particularly reading the signs that the horse is sending out that he's not comfortable or happy with what you're doing, those are often missed because they're not necessarily taught in the way that, 40, 50, 60 years ago, you learnt to read them. Mm-hmm. Because we live in an instant age. So, communication is a huge, huge subject these days in terms of the advances of technical communication. But then going back to the horse being a basic creature, he understands instinct, feel, awareness, observation, and those are all methods of communication which perhaps are underrated these days or sometimes being lost.
Yes. You talked about the ability to read the horse. You've got intuition as your next one.
Yes, intuition. I've touched on that a little bit through communication, but I put it in more with regard to being able to read your pupil. So obviously those of us, when we're educating horse and rider together, you or one should always be considering the partnership. And sometimes you consider more the horse if the horse is not going in a good way or anxious or tense, and therefore there's more emphasis on the horse. But coming back to the initial point of listening, it's always important to listen to your rider on the day, because even a rider that you know well, if they've had a hard day at work or a busy day at school and they've had pressure put on them at school, or they've done exams, or from an adult point of view, if they've had a row with their partner before they've come to a lesson, or they've had a difficult car journey, can come to you not in a good state of mind. And without being invasive and a psychologist, you've got to be able to read your pupil and say to yourself, they're not firing on all cylinders today, or I haven't quite got their concentration, or they seem distracted, or they seem uncoordinated, so maybe they're tired. And, you probe a little bit with, tell me about what day you've had. And if they've really had problems, they'll come out.
Mm-hmm.
And I always remember when I was running the riding school, and we used to, in the winter, because we didn't have an indoor school and therefore the light was limited, we couldn't run children's class lessons in the evenings because we didn't have enough light. So the children's class lessons were on a Saturday and a Sunday. And in the summer, as soon as the light changed, we had long evenings, we used to put all our Sunday lessons into the evening after school, so that we could go off competing on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first changed over, every year in March, when we would change over from Sunday lessons to evening lessons, for the first couple of weeks, the children that had ridden very competently on a Sunday, because they'd Saturday off and they'd had a lie-in and they were having a nice day on a Sunday, and they would ride extremely competently on a Sunday. And when you first come to a Tuesday or a Wednesday evening, when they'd had a long day at school and they'd perhaps had a difficult day or hadn't done their homework, or their riding ability in the first 2 or 3 evenings, when we changed to summer evenings, was awful. And my young instructors used to say to me, why are they riding so badly? And I would say to them, because they've come from a day at school and this is their letdown, and thank goodness I'm riding, but actually they're tired, they're not as mentally switched on, and therefore you have to make allowances for that. And I think often we don't read our pupil. Often our expectation is, well, you were doing so-and-so last week, so actually we'll crack on and move on and do something even better this week. And you have to be able to read your pupil, even a pupil that you don't know. It may be a pupil you've never taught before. You need to just be a little bit questioning to find out their fitness, their mental state, develop a rapport with them, establish that communication with them, and then you'll gradually be able to read them and help them according to their needs, and it links to listening.
Yes, interesting, about changing from the Sunday lessons to the week lessons. I think it was an interesting observation. And, as you said, you noticed that a couple of weeks, the first few times every year, it was just the same thing, and not one particular student, but across the board.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, now empathy. You've talked, throughout today and even last time about welfare of the horse, reading the horse, the communication with the horse, but specifically now tell us about empathy and why a world-class coach needs empathy.
Well, again, I think, it's developing as a bit of a theme in most of the things I've said, really, but empathy is about really caring about what you're working with. So obviously, those of us that work with horses, love horses.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you otherwise?
Exactly.
And then you want to imbue that caring and that love through the rider. And riders come to you with different aspirations, and obviously the competitive riders are very driven to be the best they can be, which is great. That's what sport's about. But it mustn't ever be at the expense of the horse. And therefore I think with developing competitive riders, it's important to encourage, and I've dealt a lot with young people, I mean, that's probably my area of expertise in terms of youth development. I think it's important that youngsters realise that not all horses or ponies will aspire to the levels that they aspire to, and that they must develop an awareness of a horse's capability and not physically or mentally push it beyond its ability. Now, it's very easy with something like running or jumping in terms of an ordinary athlete, because you can either run faster than the person next to you or you can't, or you can jump further, longer, higher than the person next to you or you can't.
Yep.
So that becomes self-regulating. But that isn't always the case with horses. You know, the rider may have an aspiration to want to be better than the horse is capable of, either mentally or physically. And that can become a barrier to progress, obviously. And you can't just say, well, we'll sell it and get another one, because that has connotations in itself, and finance and all the rest of it. And but it's terribly important that a rider learns to develop an awareness of a horse's capacity to do what the rider wants it to do. With jumping, it's easy because they can either jump high enough or they can't.
Yes.
With dressage training, it can be more complicated because, you know, physically, the higher up the level you go, the more of a gymnast, mentally and physically, the horse has got to be. And sometimes it doesn't have the mental aptitude, and certainly it doesn't have the physical aptitude. And I believe that the rider and the coach have a responsibility to develop the awareness of the physical and mental capability of the horse. And that again comes with reading the horse, reading the pupil, aware of technical knowledge and how much you're asking of the horse. Comes into fitness and all sorts of things, doesn't it?
Yes. And I think these, you know, you've got your 10 common traits and they link. You know, you talk about one, but you're sort of hinting about another.
Yeah.
Stamina. Tell us about stamina now.
Well, stamina's about, I mean, that for me is definitely about the educator. You know, I think my stamina has developed over years of being in the industry and being in the sport. It is very labour intensive. You know, anybody that thinks that Carl or Charlotte never muck out a horse or never have to, you know, do what I would call the nitty gritty of caring for horses, we all do.
Yes.
Even the top riders, you know, on Christmas Day, or if there's a staff shortage, or if, you know, there's a crisis in the yard and suddenly they've worked a horse and there isn't somebody to wash it off or walk it off, or, you know, we all look at the welfare of the horse and look after the horse. So we would never just walk away from the horse and say, well, I've ridden it, so that's it, that's my job done.
Yep.
And the nature of the industry dictates that sometimes there are unprecedented circumstances that make the days even longer. And you have to have stamina. Now, I actually believe that stamina, again, obviously it's a physical thing, but you can also develop mental stamina. And fortunately, the older you get, the better you get, because you begin to recognize the things that are worth worrying about and the things that actually don't matter. So yes, if you're stuck in traffic and you're not going to get to a competition on time, it's damned annoying because you've missed your entry and you've missed your slot, and it's incredibly annoying and very costly to the pocket. But actually, as long as you're all right and the horse is all right, it really doesn't matter in the bigger scheme of things. You get to a dressage competition, something spooks your horse and it blows up. Actually, it was a dressage competition. It wasn't a life-changing experience where, you know, somebody was hurt or lost. and you begin to rationalize the things that are worth worrying about, and compartmentalize the things that actually are not damaging. And then as a result of that, you develop a stronger sense of what's important and what to worry about and what to work at, and that is mental stamina.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am much stronger mentally than I was when I was 40, and balancing, running a home and bringing up a child, and
Yep.
So yeah, I think the mental stamina, physical stamina, comes from surrounding yourself with people that are supportive, that they understand the nature of what you do as a profession or as a career. I mean, I've spoken a couple of times about my husband, but I mean, I've been married to him for 46 years. He I won't say he's non-horsey, because that's how we met initially, but he's certainly as non-horsey as he can be these days.
Mm-hmm.
But he's never, ever made me feel guilty about the time I spend with horses. He knows that sometimes I'll be late home because something's happened. I always, these days, in a good communication, I try and let him know if I'm going to be later than I think I'm going to be. His argument for answering the phone is, I don't answer the phone to people I don't know, because they ask me when you're going to be back and you never are.
Okay.
And I think it is that, it's mental, physical stamina of being in an environment where you're comfortable in your own skin,
Mm-hmm.
able to manage the pressure that you put on yourself. Because again, for me, if you're teaching all day, which I still do, I'll start.
Yep.
I'll start at 8 in the morning sometimes and finish at sort of 6 or 7 at night, which is a long day.
Sure.
For me, it's important that the last lesson you teach is as good as the first lesson you teach. Now, you have to do that by managing your well-being and your stamina through the day. You can't be starting to flag in the afternoon and, God, I've got another 3 lessons to teach, because your last pupil deserves the same attention and commitment that you gave your first pupil.
Yes.
And that's learning to manage your own well-being and stamina. So yeah, I'm very lucky, and I count as one of my fortunate things that I've always been fairly robust and mentally and physically strong, and I think it's a necessity in this job.
Yes. Yes.
If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com.
Now, sense of humour. Give us an example of when having a sense of humour is going to help you with your coaching.
I think you always have to have a sense of humour with horses, because horses are the best, well, I won't say they're the most unpredictable animals on the planet, other animals, but horses are unpredictable. Even the best in the world are unpredictable. And, when the chips are down, they can react as horses, and that can be incredibly frustrating. It can cost you a gold medal or certainly a top competition. Say that sense of humour is valuable, but certainly in terms of dealing with, I think, any animal, but certainly horses, you have to keep a perspective of humour and frustration and irritation. I have pupils, particularly young pupils, who will say to me, "Why does he do that?"
Yes.
He was honest. Why does he do that? And I say, he does that because he's a horse, not because he's thinking, right, I'm going to spook at this flower pot and that'll really annoy her. They just don't think like that. And I think, we love them because of it, but they frustrate us because of it. But the frustration is it's a barrier to learning, it's a barrier to riding well, it's a barrier to relaxation. Therefore, I always try to encourage people to see the humorous side of it, not necessarily the funny side of it, but, that's horses, another day.
Yep.
And, I've judged at a regional championship in the north of the country. I've just come back from York yesterday. And on Saturday, I judged for 8 hours at prelim level, which is obviously our first level of competition. And, one or two horses really let their riders down and, came in and behaved like giraffes with their heads in the air. This is scary. And the riders, it's their first experience of a regional championship. And 2 or 3 times I wrote on the bottom of the sheet, bad luck, not his day today. And then I put a smiley face or a sad face. And I said, it's just a dressage competition, !
Yes.
Rather than, oh, what an Auty horse, and it was stiff and against you today. The rider doesn't have that kind of feedback. They need to have feedback that reflects the empathy of the person that's judging them, and the sense of understanding that, poor you, we've all been in that situation, be light-hearted about it. And that doesn't mean being flippant and sarcastic, but it means really keeping the lighter side of what at the end of the day is an easy relationship with a wonderful creature.
Yeah. And now you talked right throughout, you've just done an amazing job of bringing in, you've got your 10 points, but bringing them in and how relevant they are in different situations. The adaptability is the next one. What have you got to say about that?
Well, in the UK,
yes,
can be. I mean, we're in February, and it's about to be the hottest day of the year. I think it's about to be 18 degrees here on a February day.
Okay.
Now, next week it could be snowing.
Yes. Okay.
And, we don't. I mean, I'm going to have to talk about weather primarily, but we don't have a climate like you guys have. We suffer from weather. So if you are not adaptable in this country, you are absolutely sunk. Because as soon as you assume that it's going to be a lovely day and you can do A, B, and C, you'll get wet, and you'll find out that weather is the most inflexible thing on this planet. I think adaptability is, again, about reading your pupil, reading your horse, having that awareness of what pupil maybe wants to do today, but actually the horse is never going to do it, or the other way round. You may have a day when it's blowing a gale, the horse is a bit sharp because he was clipped yesterday, the rider's had a long day at school and is quite tired, and the horse in the first 5 minutes frightens her or him. And suddenly, having a straightforward lesson where you're running through a dressage test the next Saturday, you can't do that because you've got a horse that is behaving erratically, a rider that is frightened because the horse is behaving erratically, and suddenly you've got to do a complete turnaround in maintaining the confident rider, sorting out the horse who's being a bit sharp and naughty, and it's blowing a gale, and yesterday it was still as anything. So you come to a session with an assumption about what you're going to do at your peril, because each session, doesn't matter where it is or when it is, each session you have to be able to adapt to the circumstances. And last year, or it might have been the year before, I was doing a clinic in Finland in front of a couple of hundred people. And it was about taking a mixed ability group of riders. So I had an established level 3 coach, I had an event rider, I had a happy, horse owner, and I had a pony rider in a group of 4 riders. Mm-hmm. And the evening before this demo, I'd worked with them in the indoor school, and I'd run through what I was going to do, and I chatted to all of them, and I was very confident about how it was going to. And on the day, I had 200 people in the gallery. The experienced coach was absolutely fine, and the event rider was fine. The happy hacker got complete stage fright and shut down completely and just sort of didn't do anything in the way that she had communicated with me the night before. And the pony took complete fright, having 200 people in the gallery, and I ended up with the mother leading the child.
Wow.
And from my point of view, the whole thing was a complete disaster. But then in discussion with the audience, I had several people who were really kind and said, oh, well, you've just adapted. I mean, you had to do what you had to do, and you couldn't stop doing, FEI medium level stuff with the pony because its eyes were out on stalks saying, I've never seen so many people in the gallery before.
Yep.
And, I work on the basis that I learn something from every experience I'm in, and my goodness me, did I learn from that. And it was extremely, for me personally, when I went away afterwards, I thought that's one of the worst sessions I've ever had to do. Because personally, I felt I'd failed completely on what my remit had been, but actually I just had to adapt to the situation in hand and keep them all safe.
Yes. And I'm sure the audience appreciated it. I know as, someone in an audience myself, I would appreciate things that didn't go well and how does this person cope with them. So I'm sure they would have learned a lot and their learning would have improved because things didn't go so well and because you're able to adapt.
Well, you certainly hope so, I mean, it was a situation where I just had to get on and do what I could.
Yep. All right, now the last one we've got is resilience. Okay, you sort of talked about that as well all the way through, but what have you got to say in particular about resilience?
Well, I think, probably it's always interesting because the English language has many words for, we always get into this conversation at any of these sort of coaching things. What's being a coach, an instructor, a teacher, a trainer, and then you go to sort of somewhere like Germany or and they say, why do you have all these words? This is an educator. So that's what I tend to. But if in doubt, always look up in the dictionary. And funnily enough, I have a dictionary, but and stamina are probably very similar. They're very similarly aligned. But I think resilience, stamina for me is mental and physical strength. Mm-hmm. Resilience is more about perhaps dealing with the perception or the observations that people make about you as a professional, and how you deal with those things. And again, it reverberates with social media and people will always have opinions about other people. Oh, she's terribly bossy, or oh gosh, she's so opinionated, or oh well, you can't talk to her because she makes her own mind up about it. And for me, again, a little bit like physical stamina, mentally resilience is about dealing with, and this is probably a personal observation, dealing with the things that fly around and you think, oh, do they really think about me? Or, oh my goodness me, I'm not like that really. Underneath, I'm completely different. Why do they think that about me? Or why have they said that about me? And I think, again, you need to develop maybe a thick skin to some of the observations, opinions that will fly around. through gossip or verbal or occasionally written, and you think, no, that's not really me. And you can either let them affect you badly, which is not good, or you can have 2 or 3 trusted people or close friends or family where you bounce things off them and they are truly honest to you. And one of my pet sayings, and I think it links to resilience, is, to see yourself as other people see you. Now, we all make observations about people that we've never met. Oh, the Prime Minister, she's a dreadful person. And, oh, my goodness, she doesn't dress right, and she's always got this, and she's always got that. And we make observations all the time about people we don't know and about circumstances that we don't know. And then it comes into the light of day about, oh, well, actually, I have met that person, and gosh, she's really nice. And what a difference. And it never occurred to me that she could be so pleasant or communicative. And I suppose it's through the years of being in this industry. And I would go to certainly demos or lectures in the UK, and I would stand up to begin with and say, lovely to see so many of you here. How many of you have been to one of my days before? And there would be, perhaps half the room that would put their hand up. And I would say, thank you so much. I obviously didn't frighten you to death. Please tell the people who put their hand up that I'm not scary, and this is going to be an interactive day, and we're all going to have a great day. And everybody laughs.
Yeah.
And breaks the ice.
Yes.
And you then have, later when you talk to people, and I hope I'm quite a good communicator, people will say, oh, I was really nervous about coming to your day because, I've always thought you were scary. and I say, and do you think I'm scary now? No, it's been really good. But as soon as you move into a position where you're a fellow of the British Horse Society, you're a national judge, you're a coach educator, you come with a label. You come with a list of labels, and people judge you before they know you.
Yep.
And I used to find that really quite difficult because I used to. We're all the same. We all feel a lack of confidence when we're out of our comfort zone. We all are in a situation where we want to be liked. We all want to please the people we're working with. And when we feel we haven't stepped up to that mark, we can feel worried, insecure, upset. And I believe that you develop a resilience to that. Again, a bit like the stamina, by surrounding yourself with people, not with people that tell you you're marvellous, but people that are honest with you and say, well, yeah, you are a bit scary, Isla, and, you do come across as a bit of a dictatorial old cow. But, that comes with mileage and experience. You become braver about saying what you believe in and what what your values and beliefs are. And stand by the way life has treated you, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I try to be resilient.
Okay. I think you've yeah.
Sort of, it's a bit of a personal thing, really.
Yeah. Isla, this again has been very informative, your wealth of experience, truly. You are a world-class coach, so you can talk about the common traits amongst world-class coaches. This has been one of those things where you've just got to keep taking notes and come back and say, look, I just got to listen to that again, because if you want to keep improving your coaching, your teaching, your educating, whatever you're doing, I think you need to come back and listen to this again. There's a lot of information in there. Now, Isla, the books. I'm sure that people, now that we've talked about a countless number of books, because we never really did count, I'm not sure quite how many, if it's 12 or 13, or
14.
more? 14,
I think it's 14, because I decided I couldn't stop at 13. It wasn't the best of numbers with the power of coaching.
Yeah.
But there's going to be another one, but it's going to be a while, I think. But it's going to be Horses for Life.
Okay, that's good.
And but it's still very much embryonic at the moment. But, hopefully in the next year or 18 months, because it is about Horses for Life. Mm-hmm. And, we want to, Pammy Hutton, who is the owner of Talent Equitation Centre in Cirencester, and a world-class coach and rider in her own right. Mm-hmm. We're very good friends, and we think there's a huge amount that we can deliver in terms of horses in the 21st century. They are no longer military and work creatures. They play a huge role both in obviously competitive life, but much, much bigger than that. Leisure, rehabilitation of disadvantaged children, rehabilitation of offenders. There are all sorts of areas that horses now fill a huge role. We're sort of exploring that. And the fact that, our top Olympians, Mark Todd, Skelly, Richard Davidson in dressage, they are still competing at world-class level into their 6th decade. Yes. And that, again, is unique in our sport. So we're aiming on delivering something on Horses for Life, I think. Yes. But lots to research.
Yeah. Islay, during part of your research, I talked earlier about the movie called The Mustang. It's set in a Nevada prison, and they bring the Mustangs in. So, make sure you watch that as part of your research.
I certainly will.
It's coming out in New York and Los Angeles first of all, and then it's going to the UK. So it's going to the rest of the States and then the UK and Europe. So I'm sure if you look out for it, you'll see it. Yep. Now, where can people get these books? How can they contact you? What's the best way to contact you? What's the best way to get the books?
The books are available on Amazon. I mean, The Power of Coaching is on Amazon. Mm-hmm. I think Coaching for Riding Teachers is on Amazon. Quilla Publications are the publishers in the UK, which you would find by Google. Quilla, Quiller Publications. Contact with me. I'm on Facebook. I regularly update on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page, and so that's probably one of the ways.
But I think just to have access to the books, if people need to ask you a question, you've got so many, and in so many different areas that they could just have a look at the list of books and get the one that they're looking at with that particular area, and I think that'll probably answer the question, a lot of the times that they're going to ask you anyway. Yes.
I mean, many of the BHS books, unfortunately, are now, I won't say they're certainly out of print, because the BHS have moved their qualifications into a slightly different, more modern era, and therefore they've produced up-to-date information relevant to the syllabi that they're now following. But I mean, my coaching books are always available through Quilla or on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So, the two coaching books, which are really the thing that I have the greatest affinity towards now, they would be on Amazon.
All right, and we're looking forward to Horses for Life. We'd love to have you back again. But the Horses for Life, if it's going to be another 12 months, we'd like to have you back before then, not have to wait for the 12 months for that book to come out. So hopefully we'll see you again very soon.
Oh, well, we'll see. I mean, I hope that these sort of interviews are valuable to some people. And
I'm sure.
Certainly nice to talk to you.
Good to talk to you again too.
Now, if you're still there, you probably know that I'm absolutely passionate about education within the horse industry. That's why I host this podcast. My other venture is Online Horse College.
Have a look now at onlinehorsecollege.com and I'll see you over there.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.